everyone. Thanks for watching. Welcome to Citizen Bear, a podcast looking at the many topics from my book, The Demonstrative Citizen, The Revelation of Two Dragons, and the forthcoming second volume in the series. We are living in a time where many of our people are reconsidering how and why we should live in a certain way, how we should proceed in society. By looking at these topics, maybe we can look through some of the stereotypes placed upon our ideals. In doing so, maybe we can consider what we may be surrendering as opposed to what we may be really are being offered. In keeping, I want to read an excerpt from the book's introduction. When the boundaries of free society are shed in the name of advanced citizenship, democracy is replaced with anarchy. When active citizenship becomes singular in its view and absolute in its virtue, liberty becomes an illusion. In this we find the great lie of the authoritarian, which is that only government can change the hearts in its people, when in truth the government has almost always served to harden our hearts. Only through faith as part of a demonstrative exercise of citizenship within a free society can we open our hearts. Through faith we find the ability to set boundaries upon our passions, thereby opening our hearts and minds to the consequences of our actions or inactions. Nowhere in our society is the expression of our choices more profound or more profoundly made than through today's topic, the militia. Now, before we go, some of you go run into your gun safe and some of you catch your hair on fire. This is going to be a very different perspective view. And we're going to talk about our society and talk about some fundamental points and maybe get rid of some of the stereotypes and also talk about it from a larger perspective. Bear is the main character in this book, and he comes to use and live in the militia concept because of unconscionable circumstances in his world. And I thought this was a great topic for the beginning of this because it's such a foundational issue to free society. And while it's in a very war effort in the book, Bear explores his own feelings and his own struggle with what's going on. And therefore, the militia really is a foundational issue in the book and also in our society. And I thought this was a good time to really bring this forward and use it as a cornerstone of this conversation and this podcast. Who knows, down the road we'll probably revisit this and we'll probably come to new topics and new perspectives and certainly revisit it in different avenues. But this core topic of the militia is a very, very important start. So let's get started. Looking at the concept of militia from a fresh perspective, we're not really talking about some tribal little group of people who are running around with boonie hats trying to, change the world or protect themselves from the world. That's a misconception. That's a lie that is put out there on the militia concept in our nation. We're not really, I'm sure there are people doing that, but it's not really what we're talking about. This is a false narrative that many on the far left would want you to believe in order to really stain the concept of militia in our country and in the ideal that it stands for in our free society. And I want to clarify something very important here. When I talk about the far left, far left, in our political discourse now, I'm not talking about liberalism or, the liberal facet of the Democratic Party. Not at all. Liberalism is as important to our society as conservatism is. Both of them revolve around the center of our politics. We need liberalism to advance the ideals of increasing our liberties. We also need conservatism to make sure that those advanced liberties are well-founded in the cornerstone tenets of our society, and that we don't lose sight of those, because if we go too far too fast, we will lose our founding principles, and it will be self-destructive. So both are important. That push and pull has always been an important part of our society. Instead, when I talk about the far left in our country and in the world right now, and we are seeing it in many places, particularly in Western civilization, also referred to as the free world, we have seen a movement towards this. And we're talking really more about a neo-Marxist movement in the world. And I think we've all had to kind of wake up and differentiate on this. So I think this is an important concept when we start talking about the militia, and some of the language has been put out that because we've really been put upon. The Great American Militia, as I refer to it in the book, represents so much more than just a lot of the discourse that we've heard back and forth, and it's not a dirty word. It should never be a dirty word within our society because it is who we are. The American Militia represents the body of the American people. We are, whether it is in an individual, a regional, or a national expression of our free will, we have the ability to go out and press ourselves and take our politics and take our lives. We represent the body of the American people. We are the militia. And I would add to that by reading something from the U.S. Code, 10 U.S. Code, subsection 246, which is titled The Militia, Composition and Classes. And basically, without going into a lot of detail and drilling down too far, there is the concept of militia in the United States, and it is broken into two categories. First, the organized militia, which consists of the National Guard and the Naval Militia. Okay, we're not talking about the regular army. That's a different section, but we're talking about the state guard and things. Underneath that, number two, the unorganized militia, which consists of the members of the military, of the militia, I'm sorry, not the military, the members of the militia who are not members of the National Guard or the Naval Militia. That's us. That's everyone else. And the reason for that is that we are, yes, a pool for people who can pull on for like the regular army and the National Guard and stuff like that. But we also serve so much more. And we have seen the militia rise, the mentality of the militia rise in our nation at great times of trouble and times of smaller regional issues. But we see this in our society. We saw it at probably one of the greatest moments of this was during World War II, where people rose up and took on many tasks and many different things. We saw civil defense. People patrolled riverways and did other things in defense of the country to make sure we didn't damage agents of our enemies didn't attack, steel plants or other things like that. We had Rosie the Riveter, who was representation of the men and women who stayed behind and worked the factories while their sons and husbands went to war. And we should never forget that those people, and particularly back in that time, women didn't do a lot of work. It was a very different view. And when the men left, they went and rose up. And they met the challenge. They didn't just meet it. They exceeded expectation. The men and women who Rosie the Riveter represents drove fascism into the dirt. They outworked it. They outsupplied it. They supplied our military in the field into an enormous way. No one can deny that the body of the American people rose to that challenge. We also see this concept in many other areas, the WASPs, who were not really part of they were civilian. They were a civilian organization, but they rose to that challenge and did great work in helping the military at the time. So there's all kinds of facets without going into a huge amount of that. But the idea of a militia is instilled in our U.S. Code. We shouldn't just walk away from that or let it go. It's not that the government doesn't know that the militia exists or that, the body of the American people represent an unorganized, asymmetric force for the support of the good of the country. It's that they don't want you to know until they need you. And we shouldn't abandon that or make it into a dirty thing, because if we do, at our peril, it will go away. We will not want to instill it. And I think our enemies know that. And it's one reason that they have tried to make it into a dirty word. I think that I think it's important to reiterate that the what I call the Great American Militia is not some far-right movement. It is the body of the American people again. And we should never call it a far-right movement. Unfortunately, those who represent a neo-Marxist movement in our country believe everyone who doesn't agree with them, including liberals in some cases, frankly represent a far-right movement. And that's just not the case. Not the case at all. We need to get back to our center values as a society. So moving right along, I want to talk about an idea that leads into this and about the scope of the Great American Militia in this. And this is captured in the book. And I think one of the greatest places to capture it is through the words of Frederick Douglass, who said that a person's liberties are founded in 3 boxes: the jury box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box. Now, many have added the soapbox to that, if you will, when we stand in our free speech, and I think that's an important addition. I think we can also add the coin box, which is very important, not just because we can hold money back or use it in different ways, but that we hold the power of money in our society and free society, but also because it is how we give. We can also do so much good through tithing and other representations to many great groups that form in our society and go out and represent us. So when we talk about the American militia, we are talking about an organization, we're talking about a consciousness within our society to vote, to be in the jury, to stand in defense of our liberties. Absolutely, absolutely. And in support of our great military, absolutely, through industrialization and other things. These are all part of what the Great American Militia, the unorganized militia, does in our society. But in the end, it is the body of the American people. If you do not believe that there is a militia, if you do not believe that you're part of it, I've got bad news for you. You are, particularly if you're between the ages of about 18 and 45 under Code 10, U.S. Code 10. You're part of the militia, whether you like it or not. There is a problem in our society, and this is something that has gone a long way. And when I talk about our society, I talk about free society, which is a big concept, and we live this, and we've lived it a long time in this country. And it is enshrined in our constitutional rights and the Bill of Rights. Big government, when I talk about big government, I'm not talking about just the size of it. I'm talking about the magnitude, the intrusiveness of it, the how it absorbs and becomes an entity unto itself. It is important that in our society we represent a free society, and we are a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. We are the government. We are the military. It is our sons and daughters. It is our fathers and uncles and our aunts and everyone our parents who go to join the military, and they serve greatly, and they have done great things over our history. But we also support them from behind, and that is part of this unorganized militia, and I believe is an important part of it. And in free society, we keep we keep this concept of our openness and our unity through our values. And we express that every day in how we act and how we do things. In big government, there is a concept in that government becomes an entity unto itself, and it becomes separate, closer to an authoritarian model than really a free society. And it is one reason that big government becomes adversarial with its people and those people who disagree with the larger government idea as we move down that road. And a lot of that today is being attributed to the New World Order, which is a way forward that people have taken, which is it's not a way forward into a new form of liberty. It's a quantum leap backward into authoritarianism. They're just giving you the illusion of being free. And we've seen this happen in Canada. We saw it happen in parts of Europe. And there are frightening revelations. I mean, in England, the UK, of all places, a woman was arrested for her thoughts. And no, not just the police arrested her. The prosecutors actually brought this case to court. They actually brought this woman to trial for what she was thinking. That's not free society. Not at all. Not even close. Now, the UK has a different format constitutional basis than the United States. Our freedom of speech is expressly protected in the Constitution. But let's make no question, that is not free society. Not at all. And that big government ideal where you can take a person and arrest them for nothing just doesn't make it. And it makes the idea that the government and the people are very separated. And we've seen this in our own society. We saw this under the Biden administration very frighteningly, when not just lawfare, but we saw the President of the United States stand up on more than one occasion and threaten his political enemies, calling them terrorists. Half this country was designated a terrorist. Half this country was marked. He used the word war. That's a frightening concept. And our government, we should never fear our government. And more importantly, our government should never fear the people. We are the government in some form or matter. That is democracy within the republic. We elect representatives, but we don't elect them to attack us. We elect them to better our lives and to better our values and take us forward in the world, help lead the world. And that is something that we have seen grow in our society. And it has become a narrative that we have to fight against. So when we see the attack on the militia concept, is because they don't want you to believe that you have a right to stand up. And I don't promote, a conflict between government and its people by any stretch of the imagination. But we saw the American people push back against that through the ballot box. And for better or for worse, they move forward. And I think that that's an important thing when we look at the Americans. Like I say, when you're coming after us, we have a lever to pull, and that is through the ballot box. And we also have a lever to pull when you tell us we can't defend ourselves. We have the jury box. We have the coin box. We have the soap box. And of course, we have the cartridge box, if that is necessary. We should never lose sight of the weight of all of these boxes. Frederick Douglass was right. They are founding principles of concepts of where our liberties are enshrined. And I think it is important that for us to make sure that we never lose sight of this. And Maier uses this in his story, and he's forced to face something that's really quite difficult, because in his time against a foreign enemy that comes to his shores, the shores of this country, not to invade the whole country, but to disrupt the supply chain, to disrupt our ability to wage war by invading coastal cities and destroying infrastructure and going after us during a time of really global conflict. Maier finds himself displaced and finds himself with like-minded people fighting back against this. Unfortunately, he also finds himself fighting almost a two-front war because there's an ideological war going on in his country. And eventually the country has to settle on whether they are going to choose one path or the other. And I'm proud to say that in the book they choose free society. Government and the militia movement and others form together. They are no longer separate. And they take a better fight, and they end up forcing that enemy out of this country and also ultimately winning a global conflict. I think there's something important when I'm moving on here. I think I made my point with all of that. There's something more that the Great American Militia stands for. And it's a multi-dimensional defense of our country and in our society. And that is the fact that we can do so much, like I said, through volunteer work, through other things, and this is what happens in the book. People drive trucks, they do all kinds of things. They help move stuff around, they help supply food, all kinds of stuff, because Maier's militia movement in the early days of it doesn't really survive just on ammunition. It survives on beans, right? You need to feed people, and there are people who are not part of it, who are trapped, who've been forced out of their homes, who need supplied, and the government just can't do it all. And so there is a smuggling movement going on within the country too. And it's an interesting dialogue that actually becomes very important because it builds a supply chain for later endeavors. But we represent a lot more than that in what we're doing. And there's a couple of unspoken tasks in all of this. It's who we are in our faith, in our discourse of being in free society. We have to care for each other. We have to find a way to do better and to look to each other in society. I've always found it's interesting that almost all of us want to be loved. We want our parents to love us. We want, God to love us. We want our friends to love us. But it's important for us to love too. And we must love God. We must love our neighbors and our friends, and we must care for each other. And this is the most important part of this story that Bear lives, is that people learn to care for each other in a very, very unique way. And I think that it's an important part of what the great American militia is really about, what free society is really about, is that, of course, there are limits, but we have to try to care for one another a little bit better. We have to have our common ground in the fact that we are all part of free society. And we must see the wonder in that in each of us. And each of us has a right to express ourselves in a different way, and that's fine, that's good, as long as we all remember that we are part of that free society, and that free society is represented and expressed through this concept of an asymmetric, unorganized militia that is ready to do what needs to be done to preserve those rights and that free speech and all of our freedoms and liberties, whatever may come. I think it's important that we also talk about the fact that somewhere in all of this lies the nobility of the common man that I referred to, the common person, I should say. That we all rise up and we all do extraordinary things. This is what free society is about, that you can better yourself, that you can take yourself and be more than you are, that no one has the right to keep you down if you're willing to fight your way through and push your way through and be more if you believe in yourself. And you can make others believe in you too. And you can do the impossible. You can do noble things in times of great despair. That is free society, and that is expressing it. When we express it as a group particularly, it is the great American militia, because when that call comes, we are ready, willing, and prepared to serve our nation and each other. It doesn't always have to come as a call. It may just be that through unconscionable circumstances, things like we saw in North Carolina, where people join together and help each other out, and others come to their aid and help each other out. Even when government fails, we try to do our best for each other. And I think that is an important tenet that represents the great American militia, and now it is represented in the book. The neo-Marxist in our world, which is hopefully looks to bring in a fascist form of fascist, hybrid fascist movement, I think is, a sad demonstration of hate. We must always watch out for that, because that is the antithesis of what we stand for in free society and what the American militia really, really does stand for. We represent so much in our world, and I would say to you and represent to you that our militia, the great American militia, is one of the greatest forces for good in the history of the world. We have done so much good, not perfect, but we have done so much good in the world, directly and indirectly, through our government and through our actions and through our giving. We are a generous people, and we do that and we reach out because we believe in the concepts of free society and humanity. It is one reason when we tap and we look to these ideals, we don't work on hate. We base it on faith, hope, love, the nobility of each other. And in those principles, it is one great reason that we can never really be defeated, because we never really will submit. The great American militia has proven itself time and time again throughout history if we're willing to look at it. And we have risen to the challenges that have faced our nation, and we have stood up as one people time and time again. And this is something that we, through divisiveness and through conflict, they've tried to take away from us. And I'm proud of our people for standing up and pushing back on that and saying enough. So I would say to all of you, in conclusion to this, that free society, even a little battered, even a little beaten, stands strong, and we should relish in that, and we should participate in it. And I would say to our enemies, foreign and domestic, beware. the great American militia lives.